Question 8, Part A. Shade exactly 2 squares so that AB is the only line of symmetry for this diagram. So these are in bold here because they're really important. So I have to shade 2 squares, and this is going to be the only line of symmetry. So that means I'm going to have something above the line and something below the line. So that makes it the same on both sides. It makes it symmetrical. So if I start with putting a square in blue here. So at the minute, I have half a square above the line and half a square below the line. So that works perfectly, but I need to do 2 squares. If I colour this one in, then I would need to have this one in on the bottom as well to make it symmetrical. So that's not going to work. And the same as if I had this bottom square, I'd have to have the top square. So if I colour in this square next to it, I've coloured in 2 squares. It is symmetrical either side, and that would mean that this line AB is the only line of symmetry. So I can't actually put a line straight down the centre and have the left of here the same as what's on the right, because that would mean this square would need to be coloured in. I can't put the line diagonal because I have this square here, so that means this one would have to be coloured in, and that would be an extra colouring, so that wouldn't work. So if I've got that one on the left, I could also, that would get you 1 mark if you did that in blue, but you could also do the 2 on the other side then. So we could have this red square, and then we could do the middle red square also. Just looking at the red ones now, that would mean that would be the only line of symmetry. Another option is cutting out the middle row and having the top and bottom options. So if I have the top green square here, I'd have to have exactly the same underneath. So miss out this middle one and the green one here. So that means this line is the only one symmetrical for these 2 green squares. I can't put one straight down the middle because I'd need these 2 over here to be coloured also for it to be the same. I can't put it diagonal because this square would have to be coloured in over here, so that wouldn't work. So the 2 green squares make this line the only line of symmetry. Again, same as we did here, I could alternate that then and have the ones on the right hand side. So the pencil bit shaded in now, have the top and the bottom. So we've got 4 options that could give you the 1 mark. We have the green, the pencil, the blue, or the red. If you have any of those, that will give you 1 mark. Part B, shade exactly 1 square so that CD is the only line of symmetry for this diagram. Again, they're in bold because they're important. So I can only shade 1 square this time. So if I can only shade 1 square, what's here needs to be symmetrical. It needs to be the same over here. So that means I'm going to need to stick to the squares that are on this line here. So if I colour in this half to make that symmetrical, on the other side, that half would have to be coloured in. And there's no way I could do another line on this diagram to make it symmetrical. If it was halfway down, then this square would need to be coloured. If it was across in the middle, then the bottom square would need to be coloured. So that means this is the only line of symmetry for the blue part that I've coloured. So that's 1 correct option. So we cannot have this red one, this middle square coloured in, because that means that it would be symmetrical either side, but it wouldn't be the only line of symmetry I could have. If I shaded this middle one in, it would be symmetrical now with half that square and half that square coloured in on either side. So it would give me another line of symmetry. Going across would also be another line of symmetry because I'd have this half and that half coloured in, and also going in the opposite direction diagonal. So that centre square is not an option to colour in because I would have too many correct lines of symmetry. So that blue one would give you 1 mark. But another option that would be marked as correct is having the other opposite diagonal. So this red square here coloured in. So that would give you, same as this one, CD being the only correct line of symmetry. So if you have blue, you get 1 mark. If you have the red, you get 1 mark. Part C. Shade exactly 2 more squares so that this diagram has a rotational symmetry of order 2. So I've got to do 2 more. I already have 2, but I need to colour 2 myself. And that gives me rotational order symmetry of 2. So that means that I can turn the shape so it fits exactly onto itself until it gets back onto the original position. So we can, some people see this straight away, but I'm going to use tracing paper to double check. So how do we use this? First of all, we trace around the shapes that we've got. So I've coloured in this bit here, coloured in that bit there. Secondly, we draw an arrow. So this tells us our starting position. So this arrow needs to be pointing up when I've finished. And then I've got to count how many times this can fit exactly back onto itself until I get back to the starting position. So at the minute, that's not quite back on itself at the minute, and I'm not quite there. So now it fits onto itself. So that would be order 1. So that goes once and it fits onto itself. And now we are back to the start. So that's 2. So that has order rotational symmetry of 2. But I need to colour 2 more squares. So when I was turning that, I noticed that these 2 would not work there. So if we colour in the squares that are close to these ones here, so let's say the red one here, and here, so now I'm going to try and turn it and see if it has rotational order of 2. So that doesn't work, it's not onto each other again yet. That one, 1, so they're in the same position as they were originally, and the blue ones are. Not again. And 2. So that would work perfectly. I could have the 2 red ones shaded in. Or back to the original spot now. So I'm ignoring the red shapes and I'm going to try and colour in another square, again close to the original blue. So we're looking at green now. So if I'm moving it in that direction, then I'm going to have to come up here. So this one is also going to end up being in the same position. So again, I'm just focusing on the blue and the green. So I'm going to start turning it now. Blue is not quite in the same position yet. There it is. And my original greens were here. So that gives me 1. And when I put it back to the original, that's going to give me 2. So these here are also another possibility. So if you had the 2 red squares, that will give you 1 mark. Or if you had the 2 green squares, that would give you the mark also. There are 2 options to have that correct.